Hello, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us for this webinar. You get what you give, health and safety leadership. Now, I'm very mindful that health and safety leadership is incredibly well-trodden ground. We talk about it constantly, don't we, as a profession, as a health and safety profession. And we've got an Ed, my co-host today, and I'll introduce you to Ed in a moment, or I'll ask Ed to introduce himself. We've got no interest in going through, the benefits of health and safety leadership and that sort of thing. We are ambassadors for health and safety leadership. We all are, who's in a health and safety profession. So we want to talk about maybe a different approach to health and safety leadership, what the experts at the Health and Safety Executive feel health and safety leadership actually is. And there's a nice model we'd like to share with you, and it helps inform the qualification that we've developed with HSE on health and safety leadership excellence. So hopefully we'll take a slightly different approach to, all agreeing that health and safety leadership is a jolly good idea, and focus on what health and safety leadership actually is. So I'm Matt Powell-Howard. I'm the head of strategy at NEBOSH, and it's my role to look at new things that NEBOSH can offer as a charity to help us achieve our charitable aim. So I work very often with my colleagues at the Health and Safety Executive in developing qualifications, product services, and speaking at conferences and the like. And Ed and I have spoken together numerous times. So Ed, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So Ed Corbett, I work at the Science and Research Centre within Health and Safety Executive, heading up human factors. So the course is developed by myself and my colleagues, Vicky Whitehouse and Jane Hopkinson. So we are often on the road delivering these courses, the NEBOSH qualification, HSE qualification, to a number of leaders around the UK and abroad as well. It's quite a popular international course as well.
Yeah, so although HSE are one of our course providers for this, there are a number of other course providers as well. And as we speak, we're in the middle of COVID-19 self-isolation. And actually, in terms of NEBOSH qualifications, you can do the assessment for this at home. So any of you are interested in health and safety leadership, and I'm sure you all are, or whether you're looking to see this as a qualification which you would like to roll out to the individual, to your individual companies and the leaders within your organisations, then it's a nice one to do. Work with those course providers, those learning partners, as I should say, with our new language, who are accredited to offer this qualification, the NEBOSH HSE Certificate in Leadership Excellence via distance or e-learning. So I think we've covered the purpose of what we're trying to do with this webinar. So I think first of all, it'd be a good idea to just explore what is leadership. And there is no single definition or concept. We had a look at lots of different types of definition, and the one that we all settled on was the one given there by CIPD. That leadership can be defined as the capacity to influence people by means of personal attributes and or behaviours to achieve a common goal. And I think that excellently encapsulates what a health and safety leader should be able to do. Do you agree, Ed?
Yeah, I really like this definition. I think the focus on capacity to influence people and picking up on personal attributes and behaviours as well. I think sometimes we forget, we fall into the sort of trap of an authoritarian approach to managing others, and forget that actually leadership is more about that influence, and we call upon personal characteristics, personality, and so on, quite a lot to create that influence. So I think the non-technical skills, the emotional intelligence, and so on are also essential. I think this definition captures some of that.
Yeah, it's really good, and you can tell yourself probably not looking at different definitions, but I think this one's as good as any. Well, you would expect that from CIPD. Yeah.
Yes, I'll pick up a little bit more on the definitions here before I move on to the next slide. So, as Matt already mentioned, I think leadership's quite common ground. Most people are quite familiar. It is worth really emphasising the fact that when we put the qualification together, we did want to really emphasise the health part of health and safety leadership as well. I think as many people recognise, health is often a silent part of health and safety. The focus is often on traditional safety. In Great Britain, as the Health and Safety Executive, we do collect data about those sort of negative outcomes. And if you look at the sort of pattern of incidents over recent years, tends to be around about 140 deaths each year, I guess due to more traditional safety-related incidents at work. When you look at the health-related fatalities, it's more between sort of 12, 14,000 plus in some cases. So just to highlight how important the health part is, particularly when it comes to preventing work-related fatalities. So yeah, we really wanted to emphasise that we need to pay more attention to health as well as the traditional safety side as well. Just before leading into the next slide as well, there are a number of key factors that are really important for health and safety leaders in any organisation to think about. One of those is about them as an individual, them as a leader, and I think that's picked up in the definition here, the personal attributes, the emotional intelligence they've got, how they influence others, are they credible as a leader, do others follow them, do they sort of support their goals and so on and so forth. Also really important they have an oversight and understanding of the risk profile of their organisation, you know, where are the key priority areas they need to focus attention to managing health and safety better. Do they have a good understanding of how to motivate and influence the workforce as well? That's another key area. And also, do they have a good understanding of human behaviours, why we do what we do? Matt and I have talked quite recently about incident investigation and blame culture and so on. And often health and safety incidents end up resulting in people getting blamed for things going wrong, when actually that's not a very constructive way of doing things. So picking up on those 4 different dimensions is quite important. And in this session, we're going to focus on our values model, which links very much into the individual characteristics of being a good leader. Okay, so the values model that we have picks up on 5 critical values. Now you can think about these values with regards to current health and safety leaders. So these might be people in very senior management positions, CEO, managing directors, other directors in the organisation. They might be the health and safety lead, but also some of the more informal leaders in the workforce, supervisors to some extent as well. So it's not just about people who have a sort of leadership management job title always. Other people have quite key leadership influence as well on the organisation. In relation to the values, as I go through these, you can think about them in terms of where you're currently at as a leader within the organisation, how you're performing against them, but also potentially how you might introduce them into the selection process that you have. So we see that there are a lot of leaders out there who are maybe lacking some of these core values in the way they operate and lead on health and safety. And actually a more robust way of introducing them into your organisation is to also integrate them into how you select and recruit people. So I'll go through them very briefly here, and then we'll go through them in more detail on the following slides. So number 1, we've got building and promoting a shared health and safety vision. Number 2,
there you go.
Yeah, for number 2, we've got being considerate and responsive. Number 3, we've got providing support and recognition to the workforce. Number 4, promoting fairness and trust and relationships with others. Number 5 is encouraging improvement, innovation and learning. Then we've got a number of related elements, supporting foundations, we call them, refer to them as, and these are essential throughout the entire process as well. So that continued involvement and communication with the workforce, upwards communication as well as downward communication and across the organisation, and also being that effective role model, not just in the behaviours, but also backing that up with the other actions and decisions and prioritisation that goes on within the organisation. So these are all absolutely critical to providing the right foundations for onward success. So if we move on to the next slide. So if we pick up on the first value, you've got building and promoting a shared health and safety vision. And this is, maybe it's fairly straightforward for many, but I think it is something where a lot of organisations could put a little bit more focus. Often some of these visions are a little bit too simplistic. So we often see visions of improving health and safety performance, which is very vague. It doesn't really pin down into what you're trying to achieve. We see visions which link into zero harm to the workforce. So it's getting the right balance between not making these visions overly complicated, but also making them meaningful. I mean, to me, committing to something like zero harm, whilst it's quite admirable in many ways that you want to commit to people not getting harmed, I think most people would assume that as an organisation, you don't want your workforce to get harmed. And to me, it parallels having a financial goal as to making lots of money. So think about the vision. Is it meaningful to the workforce? Does it state the obvious? Does it sort of pin down the detail briefly enough to direct people in the right direction? And also, is it built on not just what you think as senior management, as leaders in the organisation? Have you created that engagement that the workforce are involved in contributing towards that, what that vision might look like as well? We know that success of these things tends to increase when we have that engagement and involvement from people across the workforce. So a really important foundation to set up what is it you mean by health and safety, what is it you're trying to achieve, what is that overarching ambition that you're aiming for. If we move on to value 2. So this is about being considerate and responsive. So yeah, we're still touching quite strongly on some of that emotional intelligence, listening to people's considerations, the concerns they've got. If people have worries, they can raise them quite openly and transparently, that we provide support to in relation to development and coaching opportunities to others. So yeah, that real considerate and compassion side of leadership is quite critical at this level. And then if we move on to number 3. So here we've got providing support and recognition. So really recognizing and responding positively to people, to providing that recognition to good efforts. I think all too often as leaders, we often focus on the negatives, on when things go wrong. We seem as human beings, we seem quite drawn into being critical of each other. Actually, a lot of what goes on in the workplace most days is good performance. And I think because a lot of normal performance, a lot of good performance is normal, we forget to praise people for that as well. But that's really important to reinforce some of the good things that have been done. You know, people doing a good, safe job, good pre-job plans, good toolbox talks. You know, we take that stuff for granted and don't really praise that. But that's important to reinforce. So do we do enough as leaders to reinforce some of the good stuff that we see going on out there? Do we provide the right sort of training and development and pathways for continuous improvement from a technical and non-technical point of view? Again, we can pick up those gaps through formal mechanisms, competency frameworks, and so on, as well as that sort of line management role as well, picking up on where people can develop some of those skills a little bit further. I think then if we move on to value number 4. So this is promoting fairness and trust in relationships with others. Now, this is what I find really interesting when we're working with organisations and senior managers, is that many leaders are very good at identifying the importance of trust in the relationships that you have with the workforce and influencing people. Often trust is quite strongly correlated with being able to influence others. But actually, when we ask leaders to explain how they show and demonstrate trust to others and build trust with others, they really start to struggle with giving any tangible examples of what they're able to do. So we really do promote the thought on what is it that makes you trust somebody else, and how do you create and nurture that with others in your organisation as well. So really putting a bit more thought into what trust is all about and what you need to do to build that trust. And we've got some of the wording in there which relates quite strongly to trust. So treating people fairly, having that honesty. And another term that comes up really frequently is having that humility as a leader as well. So when you, as a leader, when you do things that are maybe not right, they don't work very well, having the humility to admit that, say, yeah, we made a mistake, or I made a mistake here, and we need to maybe come up with a different plan. That humility is often appreciated and builds trust within the workforce quite well. We've got a point in there about talking the talk and walking the walk. A criticism we hear a lot from sort of operational level frontline workers is that leaders can often say the right things, but when it comes to action that supports that, there's often a bit of a mismatch, that they're saying the right things, but the actions aren't aligned. I think something that many people may be listening today will be aware of is when we talk about things like mental health and stress in the workplace. We might try to do things like, you know, running yoga sessions and all those sorts of things. But when it comes to the more fundamental issues like managing workload effectively, prioritizing the right things, often those more important, more fundamental things get neglected. And that's where people start to see this mismatch, that we're saying we're taking it seriously and it's an important thing to deal with, but actually the actions aren't really aligned. So really making sure that you're talking the talk and also walking the walk in that respect. Okay, then if we move on to number 5. So here we've got encouraging improvement, innovation and learning. Investigations play quite a key role here. That links in quite strongly to having a fair culture, a learning culture, a culture that doesn't blame individuals. So that's quite important, that leaders are part of establishing that open learning culture within an organisation. And that can mean, as a senior leader, being quite receptive to criticism. We see that in many cases that leaders struggle to hear criticism and that kind of feedback from the workforce. But those who have the humble, the humility to listen and take that on board can really make a big difference to making changes that will improve the working situation for others, the health and well-being and safety of others as well. So being open to that sort of criticism is a really important attribute of senior leaders. And having channels and avenues to allow the workforce to provide input, to come up with new ways of working, more effective ways of working, safer ways of working. And many organisations do have forums for health and safety, and they have the right intent by running those sessions. We do frequently see, though, that the communication flow, the actions that could be stemming out of those forums and networks, they often sort of stagnate, and the sort of momentum of the support from leadership fades away. And then the workforce often become frustrated and maybe disengaged from some of those processes as well. So when we set up some of these forums and engagement processes, it's really important as leaders that we support that through. The communication stays there, the commitment and the resources to make improvements stays there as well. Moving on again to traits. So we've started to touch on this already. Good communication, we've picked up on quite a lot. It's an area where many leaders tend to maybe overrate themselves. If we look at, say, 360-degree feedback from leaders themselves about how good they are at communicating tends to be significantly higher, for example, than it tends to be seen from their direct reports. So how good is that communication? How receptive are you to listening to how you can improve some of those mechanisms for hearing from others? When it comes to making changes, do we actually make some of those changes to really make a difference? Linking back to the investigation, which Matt and I frequently talk about, some of the changes are more based on what are quick wins, easy options, rather than things that will genuinely make a big difference. So we frequently see things like tweaks to procedures or retraining individuals, rather than more significant changes to removing or reducing the impact of hazards on people in working conditions. So are we making things that give us that credibility to the workforce? Are we changing things that give us that credibility to the workforce? Leading by example, something that's maybe misinterpreted on many occasions. So we're not just talking about walking around with a hard hat and holding the handrail all the time, but genuinely listening, having good conversations, solving or helping to solve the problems that people have in the workforce. When we say lead by example, the immediate image that comes to many leaders' minds is having a hard hat on and reverse parking and holding the handrail. It really is much more than some of those basic behavioural things.
It's a really good point, that, Ed, actually. I've never really thought of that before, but you're absolutely right. If you asked them what they meant, they would automatically go to PPE and following site rules, rather than demonstrating really good, high quality soft skills. That's just as important, isn't it? Taking the time to speak to people, taking a genuine interest in how they're working. And actually, people are usually delighted to talk to you about their jobs and some of the challenges they had and what they need from you. They're happy to do that, aren't they? What do you need from me to make your life easier? But I would say, if I'm talking to some of your other colleagues at HSE, Ed, one of the best-selling products I understand HSE do are and forgive me, I don't know the name of it, but those packs of cards that have questions on them that leaders can use when they go out to talk to people on the shop floor. We must not assume that because somebody's in a senior position that they do have the skills to go up to members of the workforce and go, hey, how are you doing today? Tell me about what it is you're doing, because they don't necessarily have those skills. Those cards, they sell out, don't they, is my understanding.
Yeah, so we've got the healthy deal and the safe deal cards, which can help as a bit of an aid to having some of those conversations. Definitely. And often many leaders are a little bit uncomfortable with having those conversations because they feel they're going to show their ignorance as to not really understanding the jobs that the people are doing. Yeah. So just being quite honest about that. I've never come down to this department before. I don't really know or understand the work that you guys do. Could you talk me through it? What are the challenges? What are the things that you enjoy? again, it goes back to the value of showing that genuine interest. And also, if you find that they're struggling with something, it's a great opportunity to say, you know what, I can help you sort this out. I could go away today and start to solve this for you by making some changes that will help you out. And I think, Matt, you and I have chatted a few times about safety walkabouts, and how sometimes they turn into a tick box that, if we've done our 4 walkabouts, yes, I have, job done, rather than the quality of, oh, actually, I came across that department, they had a problem, and I can actually help sort that out. So to me, it's very much about the quality of those conversations, that genuine interest in the workforce, and actually helping them solve some of those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation came about really when we were just in a previous SHE manager role where, I had this target of all of my leadership team having to do 3 walkarounds a month, and that I knew the quality of them was not very good, but that was the site standard. That's what the site, that was the organisational standard, and we were a big, multinational, and I never had the headspace to think about, well, what's more important, the quality of those walkarounds or the numbers? And it was Ed who quite rightly said, well, why were you even worried about that? Surely it's the outcome that's the important measure, not the number. And certainly when that some of them are not being done to a very good standard, or they're being done in the car, or they're, rather than being meaningful transactions, because that's where the real benefit comes, isn't it?
Definitely.
Anyway.
And it also picks up on one of the other bullet points we've got in here is about encouraging workers to adhere to site rules. Now, there are some cases where, rules are really important and we need to comply with rules. Sometimes the, work can be quite dynamic, and the situation, the context changes. It can be difficult to apply a process or a rule in a given situation. And a good leader will recognize that and support people, maybe look at how do we adapt the rules, how do we adapt the processes and procedures to support that challenging way of applying them in that situation. Poorer leaders will just say, no, that's the rule, and sort of force people to get on with it. And that's where we see what we might class as violations creeping in, because people it's impossible to comply sometimes with some of those rules. So people will naturally be still getting the job done and working around those. So really good leaders will recognize that and support people in still working safely in those contexts. Okay, so picking up on some of the other characteristics, that relentlessly driving the health and safety message forward as part of business. So we have a conversation quite frequently in these courses about looking at health and safety culture. And I think one of the conclusions we often come to is that assessing culture as a purely on the health and safety spectrum isn't necessarily always that helpful. It's how do we think about that in the context of the business culture of an organisation? Because there will naturally be other targets and goals the business has to achieve. And if we don't think about the safety culture within that wider business context, then there can be still conflicts that are created as a result of that. So, for example, how do we manage some of the commercial targets alongside achieving a good level of health and safety performance as well? Being visible and proactive, we've already touched on there a little bit, but again, going beyond just being just walking around and being visible. I think if we ask leaders again what they think being visible is, they will often say it's having a walk around, people can see me. Actually, if you ask frontline workers what it means to them, they often get more into the topic of approachability. That you feel comfortable to have a conversation with the leader. If you see them walking around, you can say, "Oh, could we just have a chat about this?" So, as a leader, do you create a relationship whereby if you're walking by, someone would be quite comfortable to stop you and have a conversation with you, maybe tell you about some of the challenges they've got in getting the job done, the pressures that they're under, and so on. So that links into many of the points on this slide, having the collaboration and support and so on. Assessing your own performance as a health and safety leader, I think this is a great image which sort of sums up some of the non-verbal communication. Many leaders will say, I'm very receptive to feedback from others. So that's what the words that come out of their mouth say, but the body language is often aligned very much with the little plaque that the guy's holding up in this image here, that actually the real intent or the real message is that actually, can you keep your mouth shut? So how do you as a leader make sure that you create that sort of culture whereby people will genuinely come and offer constructive criticism, that they will offer suggestions for improvement without feeling that's going to have negative repercussions for them? I think this sums up some of the earlier content in the slides, that not much attention we pay to some of the safe actions that people do, the healthy and safe work that people do, that we often just, as leaders, we're drawn to anything that goes wrong and criticising and blaming in those sorts of situations. So it's just to highlight in a more visual way, can we expand that green slot a little bit more, that green chunk of the pie, to make sure we're reinforcing some of the positive things that we see more, and not just going out criticising people. I think there's often a reputation in the first health and safety managers as being health and safety police, and there's much more to it than just being critical. So what can we do to praise and recognise all the good things that happen?
Yeah, I think this further extends as well to the new sort of, newish thinking around safety differently, isn't it, Ed, as well? And not just looking at the unsafe, but looking at the safe and the healthy, and the why to that. Is it luck that one part of the business is achieving this result, or is it because they've got some really great controls in place, some excellent leadership, some really committed workers who are absolutely involved? So I think this is quite an important slide really here about, don't just look at the unsafe, look at the safe, and then look at the why behind that as well, and see if that can be replicated elsewhere in the business. Sorry, Ed, you can jump in?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I think we come across a lot of organisations, some of those, I guess, quite mature organisations that are very reflective. They will make that point that actually maybe the lack of incidents is not due to having good control of work context, but more due to luck. And I think that's quite an important way of recognising it. If you're looking at what goes well, you can start to pick up on the why, as you said there, Matt. And sometimes that might be because you've got things well controlled, you've got good engagement, good input from the workforce. But sometimes it might just be because you've just been lucky.
So I think this is the last slide, and we've got some few quick questions I'd like to fire at you. But this is your key messages, really, Ed.
I guess just to sum up, in relation to the qualification as well, we really are trying to get across that importance of having good health and safety leadership, for framing it more in what it actually looks like, maybe enabling organisations to select the right people for leadership roles better, and for those already in leadership roles, that they are able to identify where they can improve, and the qualification, the assessment part of the qualification is a reflection activity to look at how they can improve across those 5 values. Picking up on that point, that it really is about bringing focus to health as well. So we're not just focusing on the safety side, we're looking for broader health and safety improvement. And also we do encourage people to draw on their support systems as well. Many leaders feel a little bit isolated and lacking in people they can go to, trusted people they can go to get feedback and support. So we really look at ways we can encourage that in a much stronger way, looking for those trusted individuals that people can go to. Yeah, and I think that essentially sums up the presentation.
No, thanks, Ed. But before we did this presentation, we asked our learners, our alumni, they're people who have gained our diploma, and our learning partners, if they had any questions for you. So I've got the easy job again. I'm just going to fire some questions at you. A lot of them, actually, you've answered as you went through. So I'm just going to pull out 2 or 3 of them. But one person asked, how can I encourage my senior leadership team to be more visible?
Yeah, I think there's probably two elements to that. One is I always think it's quite worrying if you've got individuals in leadership positions that don't see the value in that. I always question, are they in the right job in the first place? But I guess presenting them with some of the science, the evidence behind that engagement and feedback, and how that can influence and create a more positive culture within the organisation, can make improvements, and possibly starting to get them to do small gestures to start to contribute towards that. So you might set them some small objectives, maybe to demonstrate that engagement with the workforce and to demonstrate the impact that's having. It might be changes in, for example, morale, feedback that you might get in some of the people surveys you do in the organisation and so on, and gradually start to demonstrate some of the effectiveness and value that brings. Yeah,
brilliant. Well, we have another colleague here who's asked, we have the organisation that they work in, which is food manufacturing, mixed nationality workforce, and it's a medium-sized organisation. They say, we have a very positive approach to health and safety management within my business with a supportive leadership team. However, we seem to have plateaued in terms of safety and health performance. Can you or Ed give any new interventions you can recommend that can help drive kickstart improvements?
Yeah, I think maybe you've started to link to that yourself with mentioning things like safety differently, safety 1, safety 2.
Yeah.
I think a lot of organisations are struggling with this, is that they've done a lot of good things over the years. They are starting to maybe plateau in some of the incident data they've got, whether that be for health or be for safety, and looking at trying to understand more about what happens and why it happens and how you can build on that is really quite important. So yeah, showing more interest, more engagement with the workforce to see what can be improved, to see what some of the barriers and challenges are to getting the day job done, and working with some of those a little bit more. Sometimes we talk about work as imagined and work as done, so that often work is designed or created by individuals who are detached from actually doing the job. So trying to understand some of the actual pressures and realities of getting the job done can be really important. So there are certainly some things that can maybe revitalise how organisations are dealing with health and safety performance. I'd add to that as well that culture, and particularly blame culture, is often a barrier. Even organisations that see themselves as quite mature, we still see elements of blame within those organisations. And when you get blame in an organisation, you tend to get suppression of reporting of incidents. You don't get the transparency and openness in investigations, which often means lessons aren't learned very well as well. So really looking and being quite critical as an organisation. Are we doing as much as we can to create a culture where people aren't being blamed for things going wrong?
Thanks, Ed. Well, this next question, we'll make this the last question, kind of links to that really, in that a senior leader, whose name obviously I haven't disclosed, wants to know, I want to know what my workforce think about health and safety, but I never know what questions to ask. Any pointers? Well, the first part, ask them what they think about health and safety would be a good place to start. But any pointers from you, Ed, there, please?
Yeah, I think you could probably start even more openly than that as well. So just having a conversation about what works for you, what's difficult, and it might be more about just getting the job done, and safety and health issues might come out of that conversation as well. But in order to get an honest response, you do need to have that trusting relationship with the workforce that you're engaging with. So it's very much coming back to that point around having a good, open, honest, trusting relationship with the workforce. If you've got that, you can just ask a really open question about, you know, what works for you, what's challenging, what do you find difficult, what goal conflicts are getting in the way of you doing a good job. You can ask any of those open questions, but you've got to have the right trusting relationship, the right culture for people to be honest about that.
Thank you for that, Ed. Well, I think we'll draw it to a close there. This last slide here, you can see my email address, you can see Ed's email address. We'll both be delighted to link in with you on LinkedIn and the other social media platforms that I'm sure we're all over. If we can help at all, or you're interested in studying this qualification, as I think I mentioned earlier, you can do it distance learning, e-learning, and a number of our learning partners are available to do that. Once the COVID crisis lifts, then I'm sure our other provider, learning partners, who deliver this qualification, including the health and safety executive, would be delighted to talk to you. So thank you for your time today. Thank you ever so much, Ed, for taking part, and for doing all the hard work really, while I just sat here quietly listened. So thanks for
Thank you very much, Matt.
all the best. Bye bye.